A U.S. senator destroyed by blackmail.
He was not bound by the truth or by facts.
The country's most outrageous political demagogue ascending toward the peak of American power.
Millions upon millions of devoted followers.
This is a story of heroes willing to face down tyranny and the risk to the country if they fail.
Rachel Maddow presents Ultra, Season 2 of the chart-topping original podcast. Listen now on Amazon Music.
Hello and welcome to MSNBC headquarters for special coverage on this very big night. We're super happy to have you with us. I'm Rachel Maddow here along with my colleagues Lawrence O'Donnell and Stephanie Ruhle and Alex Wagner and Jen Psaki, a cast of thousands. Everybody who you don't see here now is going to be here in a second along with us. We've got Nicole Wallace. We've got Joy Reid. We've got the whole team is here. The whole clown car has been unloaded. Do you care about politics? Do you have any feelings about who you would prefer to win the next election, about who would be a better choice or a worse choice as the next president of the United States? If you do have those feelings, what were you planning on doing about it this year? Because there are about 105 days left until the presidential election. So if you are going to do something about those feelings you may have about politics, TikTok. Time is short. Were you actually planning on doing something or just watching? Yesterday, something happened that suddenly made a lot of people hear that TikTok sound a lot louder than they were hearing it before. Because before yesterday, the Biden-Harris reelection campaign was apparently getting nationwide each day, maybe a couple hundred calls a day, people saying they wanted to volunteer for the campaign. Couple 300 people, they were signing up each day to volunteer for the campaign-ish. Yesterday, the campaign says they signed up 28,000 people to volunteer. 28,000 people signed up to volunteer for the campaign in one day, more than 100 times their previous pace. In the 24 hours since Joe Biden announced that he would pass the torch to his vice president for her to lead the Democratic ticket this November, look at what has happened to the fundraising. One of the big Democratic super PACs is called Future Forward. I say they're a big one. They are very big. Before yesterday, they had about $122 million cash on hand, which is big. But that's before yesterday. On top of the $122 million they had cash on hand, yesterday, in one day, they say they received $150 million in brand new pledge donations. At Act Blue, which raises money online for Democrats up and down the ticket, including the presidential race, they took in $93 million in one day, almost entirely from small donations. The Harris campaign says that in one day, their haul was $81 million specifically just to the campaign. $81 million in one day. They say a clear majority of that was from people who were giving money for the first time in this election. More than 40,000 people who gave yesterday for the first time signed up to make their donations recurring for the duration of the campaign. The New York Times described this tonight as, quote, a record-breaking showing as Democrats welcomed her candidacy with one of the greatest gushers of cash of all time. Indeed, it is believed to be the single largest single day of fundraising by any candidate for any office in American history. Incredibly, the Republican Party's nearest boast to that is that they had a great day of fundraising. They had a really great day, their best day of fundraising, on the day their candidate was convicted on 34 felony criminal charges. And they did have their best day that day. Trump raised about $53 million that day. Looks like Kamala Harris, all in, will roughly double that. And she didn't have to commit any felonies at all to do it. In the real world of real politics, there is no question now that Kamala Harris will be the Democratic nominee for president up against Donald Trump in November. Kamala Harris spoke today at campaign headquarters in Delaware. She thanked what had been the Biden-Harris reelection campaign staff, which is now the Harris for President campaign staff. She announced that she has asked President Biden's reelection campaign manager, Jen O'Malley-Dillon, to stay on and run the Harris campaign as well. She said Ms. O'Malley-Dillon agreed. And that tells you that there will be some continuity from the previous campaign to this new one. But then immediately thereafter, she showed both in word and in deed that there will also be differences.
You know, as many of you know, before I was elected as vice president, before I was elected as United States Senator, I was the elected Attorney General, as I've mentioned, of California. And before that, I was a courtroom prosecutor. In those roles, I took on perpetrators of all kinds. Predators who abused women, fraudsters who ripped off consumers, cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type.
President Joe Biden has COVID. He is still isolating at home. He phoned into that event today at campaign headquarters. They put him on speakerphone over the PA system. It was a little bit like the opening bit on Charlie's Angels, where the disembodied voice of Charlie comes over the speakerphone and the angels get ready for their assignment. There are lots of different ways to do these counts, but tonight the Associated Press is reporting that Kamala Harris has already pledges from well over 1,000 of the roughly 2,000 delegates she will need support from in order to formally lock up the nomination. The law firm where former Attorney General Eric Holder is a partner has taken on the task of vetting possible running mate options for Vice President Harris. They are vetting the possible VP running mates for Harris. Harris's campaign has been rolling out endorsements from major Democrats all day, including from former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, the immensely influential Speaker Emeritus, they call her. They also rolled out today major endorsements from important labor unions and labor organizations, including AFSCME and the AFL-CIO and many more. We're going to be speaking in just a few minutes here tonight with the firebrand leader of the United Auto Workers, Shawn Fain. Our eyes also tonight on the other side of the aisle, where Republicans appear to be very deeply unhappy with this change on the ticket on the Democratic side. The current House Speaker, Mike Johnson, is threatening to bring a lawsuit for some reason. He's going to try to sue the Democrats into not making this change. The group behind Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation, also saying they want to bring lawsuits to stop Vice President Harris from becoming the nominee somehow. We'll be speaking momentarily tonight with Tim Alberta, who is reporting, among other things today, that there is a somewhat panicky rising wave of regret on the Republican side, regret within the Trump campaign that not only did they not plan for a change in the campaign like this, but specifically there is some buyer's remorse that they picked the unknown, hard right, weird tech bro, J.D. Vance, the most extreme candidate of everyone they vetted, to be Trump's running mate. If the best thing about J.D. Vance in terms of electability was the money he brought with him, well, Kamala Harris, as the Democratic opponent of this ticket, just brought in more money in one day than any candidate for any office has ever raised in the history of the United States. So if that was the one straight ahead benefit of J.D. Vance, today feels like a different day for that calculation. Tim Alberta today reporting that Trump campaign officials are now acknowledging that the selection of J.D. Vance was, quote, something of a luxury, meaning Vance is someone they knew would not persuade a single swing voter who wasn't already planning to vote for Trump. But before yesterday, they didn't think they'd need to persuade anyone. It's a whole new day today. We're going to be joined here exclusively in just a moment by U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. But first, let's start here. Lawrence, you got off a boat. You came back to land when you weren't supposed to be here.
Still in his boat shoes.
Still in the boat shoes, really?
Don't let the camera sneak around and see the boat shoes. Yes, racing to this coverage. Kamala Harris has had the single best first day of any presidential candidate in history, and that was yesterday. Mm-hmm. She also just had the best second day in history of any presidential candidate, and has very, very quickly snuffed out this dream that was being thrown around by the people who were very eager to get Joe Biden off the ticket. And this is a dream that's been thrown around for the better part of a year, that we could have what they would call an exciting convention where this could be a contested nomination. New York Times, in their editorial urging Joe Biden to drop out of the race, used the word exciting. Every time I saw that word exciting, I was reading the word chaos as the other alternative. And indeed, the New York Times yesterday afternoon used the word chaos to describe right away in a headline the condition that they so eagerly awaited to get to here.
Can I interject just for a moment, just to underscore what it is you were saying? I love the New York Times with the heat of 1,000 suns, but their editorial page on this issue was a megaphone on repeat for not just weeks, but months. Biden must get out. Biden must get out. Biden must get out. Biden must get out. And then as soon as Biden gets out, chaos! Biden has gotten out. It's so terrible. I mean, I don't know what is going on at the New York Times, but their editorial position is so chin out, so confident, while simultaneously being so internally contradictory and ridiculous. I mean, I have so much respect for the New York Times, but they are on planet somewhere else.
Yeah, listen, I always say this whenever I criticize the Times, which isn't very often, best newspaper that is available to us and remains that even on its bad days. Yeah. But, one of the things that the Times did not know until I had to reveal it on television, because it didn't exist as a fact in political media in America until February, after Ezra Klein's piece came out in the Times urging Biden to step aside, and so many others had come out. None of them knew that the money could only go to Kamala Harris. So they were throwing out this idea without the vaguest understanding of something that everyone knows is one of the most important, if not the most important element in political campaigns: money. None of them knew anything about that when they were throwing this around. And so they've learned gradually. And, I wasn't countering their arguments when I would discuss this. I was just pointing out all the things they didn't know, including the massive structural advantage that Kamala Harris would have and the extreme reluctance of anyone to want to run against her. They were throwing out these names of people, including Gretchen Whitmer, after she said she wouldn't do it. Yes. They couldn't believe that everyone wouldn't eagerly want to get this nomination, which would be, if it were anyone other than Kamala Harris, the single worst way of running for president. You get a 100-day campaign and you start with zero. Good luck.
Seriously. Steph, I was thinking of you when we were looking at those fundraising numbers today. And not only because I feel like you're my money advisor on these things, but also because I do feel like there's been so much attention to the sort of like eccentric right-wing billionaire class consolidating around Trump. And this just flips the script entirely.
It flips the script entirely, not just with big money donors, right? We've already heard the likes of other tech billionaire Reid Hoffman will be giving more to this campaign than he did in Biden's last, which was $10 million. But look at Act Blue yesterday. $50 million. And that's not from 3 people, 4 people. It's from scores of Americans.
Hundreds of thousands
and
of people.
every vote counts. So that's hugely important. But I want to make a point about chaos, right? Because chaos is going to ensue. I'm looking for the chaos because there are 2 points in Democratic history you could look at. When Joe Biden was running last time, right, we had all of these primary candidates bobbling their heads around. Klobuchar was up, Pete Buttigieg was up, and then suddenly over the course of one weekend, Joe Biden wasn't even up at the time. Woof, he became the candidate. Yeah. Right? We've spent the last 3 weeks with Democrats panicking, Republicans antagonizing, and then, yes, it took some time. It was painful. Suddenly yesterday, one swift move, Joe Biden makes the announcement. Look at the money that came in. Look at the endorsements that have come in over the last 24 hours. So New York Times can take their chaos. I'm looking for it.
Yeah, exactly. The consolidation of the Democratic Party around this, the opposite of chaos that is happening, because it's not just that it's consolidation and that there aren't other candidates out there that are trying to get their hand in. I mean, aside from whatever Mike Bloomberg or whatever that moment was.
Joe Manchin.
Joe Manchin, right. Okay. It would help to be a Democrat if you want to say a thing about Democratic politics. Anyway, not only is there nobody else jumping in, but to have the consolidation of endorsements and the clarity that it's going to be Harris, but then just to have this huge surge of energy, optimism, and frankly, organizing. That's
the
already
tent is
just
big,
happened.
And all the animals just got under it.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
One of I think the smartest thing that she has done in the last 36 hours, in my view, is go to the headquarters in Delaware for a couple of reasons. I've talked to a lot of the staff there. I've worked with a number of them. It's really hard. They love Joe Biden. They love her too, but they are reeling from the last 36 hours. She went there and said to them, I love you guys. I love Joe Biden, and we're going to win this thing. That's incredibly powerful. And she gave them some direction. Jen O'Malley Dillon is going to run this campaign. She also did a stump speech, which a lot of us have seen. We've seen versions of her stump speech. Most of the American public hasn't seen that stump speech, right? And you played a clip of it there that I think a lot of people watching were like, yes, I've been waiting for that. She's done versions of that. People haven't seen it. And it would have been very understandable. I mean, I've spent a lot of time on presidential campaigns for her to say, you know what, I'm going to spend a week. I got to pick my vice president. I got to write my convention speech. I'll see you guys in a few weeks. And she didn't do that. And I think that's one of the smartest things she's done in the last 36 hours.
I feel like one of the data points that was apparently being shown to Joe Biden as he was deliberating whether to stay in the race or not was the drag that he posed down ballot. And I think what you're seeing, and the Act Blue numbers really stand out to me, because that's not just about Kamala Harris. That's not just about the presidential race.
Democrats up and down.
This is Democrats up and down. And look, I think it is amazing to see the Democratic Party move so swiftly. This is not 1968 by a long stretch. I think this is also going to be really tough. I think that this is going to get nasty and brutal. And so fill the coffers, because we got 106 days to go. But the fact of the matter is, I think it is undeniable that this move is reinvigorating the party. It's brought into sharp focus. It's declared to the nation the Democratic Party sees Trump as an existential threat. They are not effing around. And that will serve the party well up and down the ballot. And by the way, the presidency is extraordinarily important, but so is the House and so is the Senate. And that shouldn't be ignored in all of
And
this.
we're already seeing in campaign events, the Democratic Senate candidates, for example, sprinting toward Harris, not just endorsing, but planning events, right? When Tammy Baldwin couldn't get within 200 miles of Joe Biden, that's not going to happen with Kamala Harris. They're going to be campaigning in the same spot.
Yes, and they want to talk about it. You will see them on our networks with greater regularity, because this is a good moment for them. And that should be, heartwarming to people who care about democracy.
The only campaign event that this compares to is 1972, when George McGovern, as the nominee, had to drop his vice presidential nominee after the convention and find a new one. And it's not as if they found a great one. They found someone who'd never held elective office before, but at least he was related to Kennedy's and had a certain kind of prominence. But it was a desperate, chaotic situation. And it felt desperate and chaotic and hopeless. And the whole sensation of that was a sinking feeling. This, starting 20 minutes after Joe Biden made his announcement yesterday, has been a surging feeling. And all of that credit for these first 2 days and the way this seamless transition in a campaign, a transition that's never occurred before, has happened, is entirely thanks to Joe Biden, entirely thanks to the way he managed yesterday, makes the gigantic, earth-shattering announcement that goes around the world, gives it 20 minutes, then tells you, this is what we should do. Kamala Harris should be our candidate, full endorsement. And you just watch all that endorsement energy pouring toward her from other people. They don't want to be the last one on. The ones who still have a political future want to get on soon. And you watch the money surge. I mean, young David Hogg told me by the end of the day, he personally just had raised $250,000 from contributors all under 30. Just an incredible surge of energy because of the way Joe Biden orchestrated yesterday.
28,000 volunteers put themselves forward in one day. It wasn't like there was a big pitch. Everybody volunteers. Nobody asked for anything. 28,000 people stood up and volunteered themselves. Nicole Wallace, you've been watching this and covering it over the course of the day. What do you make of the first, not even 24 hours plus of Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket?
Well, Joy knows this. I am often on the air when Vice President Harris has a live event, and we've been taking them almost every time there is one. We have taken it live. She's been electric on the campaign trail. She's always been a superb candidate, but she has over the last 3.5 weeks, I think there was this feeling that she was also carrying sort of the emotional weight. And all of that burst into public view today. I was on the air when the president called in, and she came out and acknowledged him after he addressed the campaign. And she said, "We love the Bidens." And he chimed in and said, "I'm watching you, kid. I love you." Now, contrast that with the reason J.D. Vance is on the ticket is because Donald Trump's vice president, not only did he not love him, he called him the P word and left him to be hung by his own supporters. Campaigns are always, you could always make an argument that you have to craft through an ad agency or an exquisite speech. That's why there are so many famous political ad makers and speechwriters. But the best way to communicate is by showing people your story. And the story that Joe Biden and Vice President Harris and whomever she picks as her running mate will be able to tell, will be one that they can show. And this chemistry it is electric, it is genuine, it is real, and it is rooted in something positive and forward looking. And I think you have to go back and watch Thursday night's speech, which I think we all maybe lost a year of our lives sitting through those 11 hours. No, it was only 2. But, go back and watch that speech and then watch the stump speech that Vice President Harris gave today. And I agree with Alex that it'll be ugly because the core of the Republican Party is fear-based. But I think it'll feel like a righteous campaign. You will be on the side of the entire pro-democracy coalition, which now owes Joe Biden and Kamala Harris all of their effort, all of their work, and a sacrifice that rivals the one that Joe Biden made yesterday at 1:46 p.m.
Joy Reid, our friend, you have also been invoked, so you get doubly brought into the conversation right now. Joy, I know you just had your show. You've been covering this over the course of the day, too. What's your reaction to what Nicole just said?
And I got to be with Nicole. We did a fun handover. It was amazing.
So fun.
Listen, what I will say, I will amplify everything that you all have said, which is all so smart. What you see in Vice President Harris and President Biden is a genuine partnership. They have genuine affection for one another. Their families are genuinely friends, and they are a real partnership. And the handover from President Biden to Vice President Harris, it calmed the chaos in the party. That's a president's job, to take the chaos around them and to calm it and to organize it into something productive. President Biden showed why he picked her, why it was smart to pick her. And in blessing her, he not only calmed the chaos, he created an electrifying result. I was on that 44,000 person Black women's call for Win with Black Women last night. It was on till 1:15 in the morning. They raised $1.5 million in an hour and a half. These are people who gave as little as $13. There is power in that. I have not personally seen anything like that kind of energy since 2008. And then I'll contrast that with Donald Trump, who picked his running mate because his son, Don Jr., and Tucker Carlson liked him. And he made the biggest mistake in modern political history. They're going to send women running to the party of the future.
I have heard, that's about the 5th time today I've heard that analogy to the energy from 2008. And you're not sort of hearing it, I think, from anybody who's picking any particular metric, but are talking about the feeling, talking about the energy on the Democratic side, the enthusiasm, and the sort of let's go feeling happening among those who are supporting the Democratic ticket. Thanks to both of you. We'll be back with you. Joining us now exclusively here tonight is our nation's Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg. We should note that he is appearing tonight in his personal capacity, not in his official one as a member of the Biden administration. Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for being here. We're really happy to have the chance to talk with you.
Thanks a lot for having me on. And for tonight's purposes, since I am on in private capacity, please just call me Pete.
I will find that uncomfortable to do so, and so I'll try to awkwardly avoid calling you anything. Let me ask you about personally what these last few days have been like for you. Obviously, you ran for president yourself in 2020. You're a member of the president's cabinet. You have since endorsed Vice President Harris in her presidential bid since the president has said that he endorses her as well. What has your few days been like, and how are you feeling tonight?
It's been an extraordinary few days. I was actually on a plane. Maybe fittingly enough, Chasten and I were making our way back home to Michigan after appearing with Vice President Harris on Saturday for a fundraiser to support the Biden-Harris ticket in Massachusetts. And like everybody, stunned by the news and really moved to see the president do what he's done time and time again, which is to put our country first. I think it's really important to note just how world historically rare it is for the most powerful person in the world to set aside that power. That has only happened a handful of times, especially doing it in the interest of the country and in the interest of the party. And at the same time, making clear that he's going to keep doing his job as president, leading what has already been established as one of the most productive and one of the most beneficial presidencies in American history. And was then moved even more to see him support Vice President Harris. I reached out to her yesterday afternoon and wanted to let her know right away that I was going to do the same. We had a great conversation. I have campaigned alongside her. I have traveled with her. I have served with her, and she's going to be an extraordinary leader for the ticket, for the party, and for the country as president.
Having that kind of relationship with Vice President Harris as a member of the cabinet yourself, somebody who has come up in a somewhat parallel fashion with her in the last few years in the Democratic Party, both very well regarded in your runs for president in 2020 and a nomination that was ultimately won by President Biden, who went on to win in the general. Do you have anything to sort of explain to the country, to explain to our viewers about what to expect that will be different from a campaign led by Vice President Harris as opposed to the campaign that we were seeing from President Biden? Obviously, they're good partners to one another and very unified in this moment. Their expressions of sort of mutual appreciation, mutual love today, I think put that in a very emotional terms. But how should we expect this campaign to be different with her at the helm?
Well, I think we're certainly going to see consistency in terms of the values and the direction. Obviously, she has been a part of this historically effective administration. You're going to continue to see a focus on making sure that government is working and taking the side of people like my neighbors in Michigan, people trying to get through their lives. She had a strong emphasis on the middle class in her comments at headquarters in Wilmington today, coupled with a continued focus on making sure that we don't allow somebody like Donald Trump, who has always acted to favor wealthy people like him, to say nothing of the threat to democracy, making sure that case is made. What's different, I think, is of course a different messenger, a different leader, one who has worked closely with President Biden, has a lot of consistency with President Biden, but she represents a different generation. She represents a different style. We heard her talk about how in her background as a prosecutor, part of what she did was defend the public from people who ran scams at for-profit universities, people who were responsible for sexual assaults. In other words, people like Donald Trump. And at the same time, we heard this positive vision, this really energizing vision. You could see it. We happen to have the TV on in our kitchen as she addressed the campaign staff in Wilmington. It was just as we were putting the mac and cheese out for our son and daughter, and it was amazing when my daughter, who's about to be 3, pointed to the TV and said, "What's that?" I just felt goosebumps as I heard myself saying, "That's Kamala Harris, and she's going to be the next president."
When you endorsed Vice President Harris, you said you'd do all you can to help her win. Would you serve as her vice president if she asked you to?
She's going to make that decision. She's going to do it based on what's best for the country, best for the party, and best for the ticket. I will do everything in my power to make sure that she is the next president, because it's so important. And it's really most of all important in terms of how everyday life is going to change. I think another really important thing that will come of the president's extraordinary decision and sacrifice that he made is an opportunity to really refocus this campaign on what it means for people around America. Of course, we're going to talk about Kamala Harris and her extraordinary leadership. We're going to talk about Donald Trump and his unfitness for office and J.D. Vance and his inability to show any evidence that he believes in anything in any durable way. But honestly, most of this campaign will not be about them. It'll be about the American people. And this is a chance to really bring that home. I'm excited to be out there on the trail whenever there's an opportunity to remind people of that and remind people that they already agree with Kamala Harris and Democrats and disagree with Donald Trump and Republicans on issue after issue after issue, from taxes to gun safety to a woman's right to choose.
I don't mean to be weird, and this started off weird with you asking me to call you Pete, and I can't, and that's weird itself. But if she asked, are you saying you wouldn't say no?
Sure. We're just not in that mode right now. You know, we're on the second day since the president made his decision, and I trust her. By the way, few people in the country know more about the vice presidency and about the weight of that decision than she does. Very much trust her to make a choice that makes sense to her, that is right for the party, and that's right for the country.
Pete Buttigieg, I really appreciate you being here tonight, sir. It's a pleasure to have you with us, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Is that weird?
No. You just you listen for one word. Just listen for the word no, and I don't think you're going to hear the word no from any of the
well, Gretchen Whitmer said no. Gretchen Whitmer said she will not.
Right.
She would not serve as vice president if she were asked. She's the only person who said no. But that wasn't a no.
No, not at all.
But it was an audible swallow. Yes. that's who asked the question, which I think anyone who's asked the question feels. Of course they want. I will say, though, of course he should be considered and be on the list.
Yeah.
And there's a huge list of people who will be considered and should be. The most important thing, it is very fun to do the battleship game of this. I'm not going to lie, as a lover of politics. The most important question is not actually, in my view, what state they bring, because who knows, right? Or what electoral vote. It is, who is the person a President Harris sitting behind the Resolute desk or whatever the desk is wants to call and say, this is a hard decision.
Yep.
What do you think? And the other piece of it, even before then, is there's 105 or 106 days, depending on how you count it, between now and the election. It's very short. You can't have somebody who has no profile and no charisma. You need somebody who can go out there and raise money on their own, do big events on their own.
Yep.
So to me, those are the big things.
But she's looking potentially at an all-star list of people.
It's a huge bench. It's amazing.
It's an amazing bench. And that's what we didn't see happen last week with Donald Trump. Right? You could love or hate J.D. Vance, but J.D. Vance is not going to bring one single voter to Donald Trump that Donald Trump didn't already have in his pocket. It's MAGA squared. And from the lineup, and obviously nobody's been confirmed that we're hearing that's been reported, who Kamala Harris is potentially considering, those are people who bring voters from different states, who bring different demographics, and that matters.
Yeah. When we come back, we're going to have New Jersey Senator Cory Booker with us. Senator Booker is a close friend of Vice President Harris, having served with her in the Senate. We got a lot to get to tonight. Stay with us. Thanks for being here.
Over the next 106 days, we are going to take our case to the American people, and we are going to win.
MSNBC's Lawrence O'Donnell.
When I was working in the Senate, I didn't realize that it's the perfect training for the job that I have now, covering government, covering politics, the complexity of it all. Mastering the detail is crucial to being able to present anything that happens in Senate buildings or any of the other news centers that we have to focus on every day.
The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell, weeknights at 10 p.m. Eastern on MSNBC.
A U.S. senator destroyed by blackmail.
He was not bound by the truth or by facts.
The country's most outrageous political demagogue ascending toward the peak of American power.
Millions upon millions of devoted followers.
This is a story of heroes willing to face down tyranny and the risk to the country if they fail.
Rachel Maddow presents Ultra, Season 2 of the chart-topping original podcast. Listen now on Spotify. Stay up to date on the biggest issues of the day with the MSNBC Daily newsletter. Each morning, you'll get analysis by experts you trust, video highlights from your favorite shows.
2024 is now truly the most important election in the history of our country.
Previews of our podcasts and documentaries, plus written perspectives from the newsmakers themselves, all sent directly to your inbox each morning. Get the best of MSNBC all in one place. Sign up for MSNBC Daily at msnbc.com.
So in the next 106 days, we have work to do. We have doors to knock on. We have people to talk to. We have phone calls to make. And we have an election to win. So are you ready to get to work? Do we believe in freedom? Do we believe in opportunity? Do we believe in the promise of America? And are we willing to fight for it? And when we fight, we win. God bless you all, and God bless the United States of America and Joe Biden.
Vice President Kamala Harris just a few hours ago at Wilmington, Delaware campaign headquarters. Someone else who is fired up about this moment is New Jersey Democratic Senator Cory Booker. He wrote online today, quote, "For the last decade, I have had the privilege of calling Kamala Harris a friend, a Senate colleague, my vice president, my sister. I cannot wait to do everything I can to help her make history and call her Madam President." You see the photo that he posted here. Jen Psaki, over to you.
So joining us now, that's a perfect cue up, is the person in that photo, Democratic Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey. Hi, Senator Booker. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Great. So as Rachel just noted, and I know, you are not just former colleagues, you are very good friends with the vice president. So I want to start by asking you if you've had a chance to speak with her since the news broke. It's been a kind of a wild 30 hours over the last 30 hours.
So you're going to embarrass me, but we missed each other last night. I kept getting text messages from her staff, but I have not talked to her yet.
That's not embarrassing.
But I'm very excited.
You played phone tag.
Yeah. Well, my mom said. Yeah. Well, my mom said you should make sure you're available when the vice president calls you.
That's good advice from your mom. Moms give good advice. Well, let me ask you. I mean, there's so much in your history, but you sat right next to then Senator Harris on the Judiciary Committee, which means you had a front row seat, more front row than almost anyone else, for her incredibly effective questioning of people like, say, Bill Barr. So I wanted to ask you, there hasn't been the debate. Donald Trump's been a little backing off of the debate here. I think there should be a debate. She should debate. Talk to us a little bit about that skill set and how it would translate to the debate stage.
Yeah, look, I got a chance to sit next to her during some of the most important hearings in American history. Donald Trump's, many of his cabinet secretaries, Supreme Court justices, and more. And I will tell you, she does an extraordinary job preparing, knowing her material backwards and forwards, and has a way of getting to the heart of the matter. I'll never forget her questioning of soon-to-be Attorney General Barr and talking to him about, his enforcement of reproductive rights, or even, frankly, Brett Kavanaugh about reproductive rights. She had a way of exposing the absurdity of an administration that was determined to do everything it could to undermine women's reproductive rights. So she's effective. And I think America is going to get a master's class coming up in this election about how someone deals with Donald Trump, who has been, in many ways, able to get away in debates and more with behavior and lies, and really nobody pressing him hard on his own record and his failures and, frankly, criminal activity.
Yeah, we saw, to your point, we saw that when she gave the speech today at the campaign headquarters, part of her stump speech, but I think a lot of people who haven't seen it before saw how she's going to prosecute the case against Trump. So you, as I understand it, you played a role in actually encouraging her to run for Senate, which means you must have seen something in her that many years ago when she was still the Attorney General of California. The country's getting to know her. You know her well. What do you hope the American people see about her, personally or otherwise, over the next 105 days?
Yeah, look, I mean, she's been the vice president, dutifully supporting Joe Biden, who in no uncertain terms, I believe, is the best president we've had in my lifetime in terms of delivering things. Well, she was his partner in doing that. But yet at the same time, she wasn't really someone that the American public got to know at the level that they get to know their president. So I'm just excited for America to discover her truth, her heart, her character. She is someone that really passionately cares about people, especially people that are often overlooked or looked down upon. She has a moral compass that is unwavering. And I think these are things that we need in a president. She's strong, she's tough, but God, she has some of Joe Biden's superpower of empathy and compassion and grace. So this is going to be a wonderful 106 days where I think America every day is going to discover more things about her. And what I've seen in this last 24 hours is historic. She now has set a record for both parties as being the presidential candidate who's raised the most money in a 24-hour period ever. And this just shows a sort of volcanic eruption. There has been, in many ways, I think, a hunger for this kind of next generation kind of candidate, someone who represents the future, who represents our hopes and aspirations, and someone who has the kind of policy chops and leadership ability to deliver on them. I think America now wants to turn the page and start moving towards a new generation of possibility and hope. And I think that is just going to be exciting for a lot of people, and more people are going to come on board. In fact, 60% of her donors had not even been involved contributing to this 2024 cycle. So it's exciting how many people she's going to get off the sidelines and onto the field to help us win in November.
No question. I mean, the last 30 hours have been historic, and every Democrat I talked to is incredibly energized. My colleague Alex Wagner, who's sitting next to me, did note earlier, which is important for everybody to remember, this is going to be a tough election, very tough. And I wanted to ask you just about all of the inevitable sexist and racist attacks. We've already seen them coming from MAGA world and Donald Trump and his allies over the years. It's going to pick up. I mean, part of the goal of those, I just want to call out, is to cut her down, but also to feed into this idea that the country isn't ready to elect an African-American woman. So how should the campaign and people out there who are worried about those attacks, how should they be responding to these attacks as they inevitably come?
Well, I think, first of all, you call them as they are. This election is about the American people. It's about who is going to best deliver for kitchen table economics, as the Biden-Harris team has already done in lowering insulin costs and lowering the cost of health care. It's about who's going to help for a better future for our young people and help with college affordability and job training. It's going to be, frankly, about women's reproductive rights and the other rights and freedoms that seem to be being rolled back by the Supreme Court. And so I think keeping the focus not on whatever kind of slurs and hate and misogyny we're going to experience. It's not about what they say about us. It's about how much we show up every day relentlessly and tell our truth. And we as a party are bigger than a party. I have always said the Democratic Party at its best is the party of we and not the party of me. It's a party of inclusion and not the party of exclusion. It is the party of historic diversity, women's rights and LGBTQ rights and civil rights. It's also the party of labor and unions. These are the kind of things that I think America really wants. And you see Trump and his vice presidential nominee trying to turn, in many ways, distorting the truth of their Project 2025, and really with a union leader speaking, trying to pretend that there's something they're not. The American people want to be united around an administration that really is focused on American excellence and making sure that every American is being seen and valued. And I'm telling you, that's something that Kamala Harris will do as president of the United States.
Senator Cory Booker, always an uplifting message. I always love that about talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be on.
You know, what he said there about that Vice President Harris has some of the same superpower that Joe Biden has. I'm cognizant of the fact that we have described two different things as Joe Biden's superpower. One being the fact that he believes, I think he's right, that he's often underestimated, but the other being his empathy, that his means of connecting with people, both through the television screen, through all the mediating forces that the president has available to him, but also one-on-one when he's looking people eye to eye, is that empathy. And I think for Senator Booker to identify that in Vice President Harris is right. I think that's true about her. But I think that's also maybe a big part of why Joe Biden picked her in the first place, because that was the important value and the important characteristic that they shared, and that lots of good politicians have other things, but they don't necessarily have that.
Can I also say I'm sad Cory Booker didn't mention that Kamala Harris taught him how to cut an onion. They have a very when he says my sister, I've interviewed both. I've talked to both of them about this. They're really close. Like she got on her FaceTime and was like, Cory, this is how you do it. She's a legit cook, and if you get her started on food, she will talk to you about it. When you talk about empathy, I'm not to waxing overly poetic, but cooking is a form of love, and it is a form of generosity, and I'm sure we'll hear about it at some point.
Now I want to know how to chop an onion.
I know, as do I. Well,
leave your notes in the comments.
Yeah.
All right. Next year tonight, new reporting about how the Trump campaign appears to be having a little bit of buyer's remorse over their choice to add J.D. Vance to the ticket. They locked that in, and then Joe Biden changed everything. Oops. The reporter who broke that very interesting and still developing story is going to join us here next when our special coverage continues. Stay with us.
It is so good to hear our president's voice. Joe, I know you're still on the call, and we've been talking every day. You guys heard it from Doug's voice. We love Joe and Jill. We really do. They truly are like family to us. And we do. Everybody here does.
It's mutual.
I knew you were still there. You're not going anywhere, Joe.
I'm watching you, kid. I'm watching you, kid. I love you.
I love you, Joe.
MSNBC's Lawrence O'Donnell.
I have an obligation to find a way of telling this story that is fresh, that has angles that haven't been used in the course of the day, to bring my experience working in the Senate, working in journalism, to try to make sense of what has happened and help you make sense of what it means to you.
The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell, weeknights at 10 p.m. Eastern on MSNBC. Today's news requires more facts, more context, and more analysis. The world's never been harder to understand. That's why it's never been more important to try. MSNBC. Understand more.
Samuel Miller, 40 acres on Edisto. Fergus Wilson, 40 acres on Sapelo Island. Primus Morrison, 40 acres on Edisto.
More than 1,200 formerly enslaved people got land from the federal government and then had it taken away.
This was a betrayal.
I'm Al Letson, host of the Reveal podcast. Our new series, 40 Acres and a Lie, is available now. Subscribe to Reveal wherever you get your podcasts.
It is the weirdest thing to me. Democrats say that it is racist to believe, well, they say it's racist to do anything. I had a Diet Mountain Dew yesterday and one today. I'm sure they're going to call that racist too, but it's good. I love you guys.
Okay. If you're wondering how the Trump campaign is handling the developments of the last 36 hours or so, you could just listen to J.D. Vance absolutely rocking the house on the stump today, his first full day of campaigning. Or you could consider these couple of headlines less than 2 weeks apart, both from the deeply sourced reporter Tim Alberta at The Atlantic magazine. Just a couple of weeks ago, earlier this month, Tim Alberta published this important piece, the result of months of reporting from inside the Trump campaign. Trump is planning for a landslide win. Note the subhead here, quote, and his campaign is all but praying that Joe Biden doesn't drop out. That was a couple of weeks ago. This today is Tim Alberta's latest piece for The Atlantic. After Joe Biden did drop out and endorsed his vice president, Kamala Harris, quote, this is exactly what the Trump team feared. A campaign that had been optimized to beat Joe Biden must now be reinvented. In the new political world that has cracked open in the last day and a half, there is a specific regret bubbling in Trump world that maybe a far-right freshman senator nobody's really heard of, who was created in a lab by eccentric tech billionaires who are literally on the record as being opposed both to democracy and to women having the right to vote, maybe that guy wasn't the ideal choice to be Donald Trump's vice presidential pick, especially now that it looks much less like the Republicans have this thing in the bag. Tim Alberta writing today that, quote, the most striking thing I've heard from Trump allies was the second guessing of J.D. Vance, a selection they acknowledged that was born of cockiness, meant to run up margins with the base in a blowout rather than persuade swing voters in a nail-biter. Alex Wagner, over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. I, too, was struck by that particular line in Tim's reporting today. And joining us now is the man himself, staff writer at The Atlantic, the great Tim Alberta. Tim, I would love it if you could please elaborate on the buyer's remorse in the Trump campaign around J.D. Vance that you're hearing inklings of, but also, you know, seeing as you have a magic 8-ball none of us possess, what kind of vice presidential pick do you sense that Team Trump is most concerned about as presumably nominee Harris is making her deliberations?
Hey, good evening, Alex. That's a really good question. Let me take the first part about the buyer's remorse. I mean, I think that that's overstating it. I don't see anyone having sort of a meltdown inside Trump HQ at this point. But I think certainly what I've detected in conversations here over the last 24 hours is a little bit of a second guessing and a little bit of a counterfactual that everyone is thinking about here. Because if you really place the selection of J.D. Vance in the context of the last couple of months, look, Donald Trump was always operating on sort of parallel tracks and thinking about his running mate. On the one track, he was thinking about kind of a vanilla, non-controversial caretaker type, someone who, like Mike Pence did in 2016, could sort of provide some reassurance to voters who were on the fence about him. And that's where people like Doug Burgum, for example, were really appealing. And on the other track, it was the thought of picking someone who was kind of bold, someone who was more ideological, someone who had more of an edge, and who could frankly be kind of an heir apparent to the MAGA empire. And that's obviously where Donald Trump became sort of enamored of the idea of picking J.D. Vance. What I was told, you guys, is that for much of the campaign, Trump was really leaning in that first direction towards a Doug Burgum like candidate to nominate as VP. But I think it's not coincidental that as the campaign more recently, like over the last 6 weeks or so, as the campaign really felt like it was pulling away and getting into a position not just to defeat Joe Biden, but to potentially blow Biden out and to have the House, have the Senate be in a position to really pass dramatic governing agenda, populist agenda that they had never been able to accomplish in a first term. That's not coincidentally, I think, when Trump really began to convince himself and people around him that, hey, we could go with someone like Vance. And so now, with Biden getting out and with the race really resetting in this way, I think that there's certainly now some second guessing, because if in fact Kamala Harris is able to piece together a much more viable, competent campaign and really take this down to the wire against Trump, then they're going to think to themselves, well, does J.D. Vance really help us with a lot of these suburban swing voters who are on the fence in the way that someone else could have? Now, to that same point, this is where Kamala Harris, if in fact she's the nominee, her selection of a running mate is going to be hugely significant. And I can tell you that the Trump folks are especially worried about two people, Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona, and Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania. Both of those gentlemen are able potentially to put into play a battleground state that the Trump folks were confident had already been taken off the map. So J.D. Vance doubles down on some core strengths of Trump, but Ohio is already in the bag. And yes, he's got some appeal, perhaps in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, those Rust Belt states. But frankly, the Trump people 48 hours ago, they were talking about expanding the map, about playing in Virginia, Minnesota, New Hampshire, trying to run up the electoral score up into the 320s, 330s. At this point now, they recognize that if Kamala Harris really gets her act together, if she really unifies the Democratic Party, if the Democrats start firing on all cylinders, and if she adds someone like a Kelly or Shapiro to the ticket, suddenly that map is quickly contracting back down, and potentially Trump is playing defense in some of these states that he thought were already put away.
Wow, there are there's going to be a lot more reporting that needs to be done, and I'm going to look to you, Tim Alberta, to do it in terms of what is happening inside a campaign that was, as you report, optimized around Joe Biden. Tim Alberta, staff writer with The Atlantic. Thanks so much for your reporting and thoughts, Tim. Rachel?
We are very lucky that Tim Alberta was like embedded in that campaign and developed those relationships before all of this happened so that we can see through him the way they have reacted to it. It's fascinating.
On the record, deep inside the campaign with Chris LaSavita and Susie Wiles, the two sort of Svengalis of the whole Trump operation.
Yeah. If you're just joining us, it's just coming up on 9 p.m. Eastern time. We thank you for being with us for our special coverage in this incredible moment in American politics. We were speaking earlier about Vice President Harris having made 2 public appearances today for the first time since President Biden left his reelection bid to her, effectively stepping down from his effort to achieve a second term and instead endorsing her. In that time, we've seen this remarkable consolidation of support for her in the Democratic Party, and also an incredible wave of energy and honestly money, fundraising from donors large and small, trying to build her campaign into what looks like is going to be a juggernaut effort against Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Her first public appearance today was at an event at the White House with NCAA athletes. Her second appearance was in Delaware at campaign headquarters. It was an interesting dynamic there because she gave a little bit of a stump speech, a little bit of a pep talk to the gathered staff, but so did President Biden. President Biden not there in person. He is still isolating at home in Delaware with COVID, but he appeared at that event sort of virtually or audibly and said this to the staff.
I know yesterday's news was surprising and it was hard for you to hear, but it was the right thing to do. I know it's hard because you poured your heart and soul into me to help us win this thing, help me get this nomination. The name has changed at the top of the ticket, but the mission hasn't changed at all. So I'm hoping you'll give every bit of your heart and soul that you gave to me to Kamala.
President Joe Biden appearing effectively on speakerphone at his campaign headquarters today, again, still isolating with COVID, although we have learned since we've been on the air tonight that President Biden is due to leave Delaware and return to the White House for the first time since his COVID diagnosis as of tomorrow afternoon. Like we don't know what that means in terms of expected remarks from the president. We do expect that he will make some sort of speech after having made the announcement that he was abandoning his reelection effort via a paper statement that he posted online. We don't know when that speech will be, but again, President Joe Biden will be back at the White House, we're told, tomorrow afternoon. When he thanked his campaign staff today for pouring their heart and soul into helping him win, he asked them to now transfer that to give the same to Kamala Harris. That transfer does appear to be happening basically at every level of Democratic politics, from the state parties, which are one by one now pledging all of their delegates to Vice President Harris, all the way to Congress, where we are seeing just a flood of endorsements for her and only her. Among the many endorsements for Harris thus far is one that has just come from the Congressional Progressive Caucus PAC. The Congressional Progressive Caucus PAC saying, quote, Kamala Harris will defeat Donald Trump, not only because she offers a stronger economic vision, but because she will defend the fundamental rights and freedoms that MAGA Republicans are attacking across the nation. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal is the co-chair of the Progressive Caucus PAC, and she's standing by with Joy Reid. Joy, over to you.
Thank you very much, Rachel, and welcome, Congresswoman Jayapal. Thank you so much for joining us. So I do want to jump right in on that exact point. Progressive Democrats, the Progressive Caucus, really, I think, surprised a lot of people by standing so firmly with President Biden as so many other groups were pushing him to exit the race. The Progressives stuck with him. And so tell me the level of excitement about this shift and his handover to Vice President Harris.
Well, Joy, it's great to see you as always. Look, I think that the Progressive Caucus has been President Biden's largest block of votes through his whole Build Back Better agenda, that whole first 2 years and everything we got done. We saw President Biden lay out something that was really remarkable, a progressive economic vision that lifts up working people, that taxes the wealthiest, that makes sure that no matter who you are, no matter what your income is, no matter what your race is, no matter where you are in the country, you have opportunity. And I think that was really a huge effort for all of us to come together and to help get those things done. And so, yes, there was a lot of loyalty to President Biden. I also think that there were concerns. It wasn't like everybody was completely on the same page. But I think, you can't just look at who the nominee needs to be in isolation. You need to look at all of the past. So I never believed that we should be having that conversation in public. I thought we should be having it in private. But what happened. Now, I think what you have seen is a remarkable coming together now that President Biden has made that decision to step away, to endorse Kamala Harris. There was just an incredible level of excitement and support for her because she is the candidate that was actually voted for, just like President Biden was, by millions of people across the country. Delegates voted for the Biden-Harris ticket. And so they know her and they know that she is a part of President Biden's agenda, as well as the past agenda, as well as the 100-day agenda that he's laid forward, that he spoke about in Detroit. She's obviously going to put her stamp on that. But I think we all feel very comfortable that she is going to be able to build that same fragile coalition that we had in 2020 with progressives, with swing voters, with women, Black, brown, young people. There is really that energy now. And so I'm just really proud to be all in for her. As I said to her when she called me yesterday, right after the president made his announcement, I'm 1,000% in. We got to win this. And she is the one that is uniquely capable of prosecuting, in every sense of the word, Donald Trump on our rights, on our freedoms, and presenting that working class agenda, that agenda for poor people, that is really going to mobilize people to know how their life will change when Kamala Harris is president of the United States.
So, Congressman, I just want to depict in a couple of those issues that we know that there was obviously a lot of hard work that the Progressive Caucus did with the president. One of the issues that there was a divide on was obviously Israel-Gaza. The Gaza conflict has been a source of consternation for many younger voters, and it kind of started to peel them away from him. Kamala Harris got a much better reception on college campuses around that issue. Her presentation seemed to be less divisive. We've now seen that she will not be sitting in the well of the House when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gives his joint address, which he was invited to do. She will not be there. She will actually be in Indianapolis presenting to the Zeta Phi Beta sorority incorporated. She'll be there doing that instead. She's going to meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu, as will the president, but she's not going to be there. That's a big kind of deal. I've heard from a lot of Palestinian Americans and some who are in an activist role who say they feel relieved that she will be the head of the ticket because it actually reopens the door for some of those voters who were turned away on that issue. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that's absolutely right. I had an opportunity to speak with the vice president when she was in Seattle a couple of weeks ago about Israel-Gaza. We spent about 45 minutes talking about it. And I do think she has a deep empathy for the situation of Palestinian Americans. It's more natural to her. I also think she's hearing from a lot of Black clergy. As you know, Joy, this is one of the top issues in the Black community is this war. And I think that there is some real resonance with the Palestinian people in a very different way. Obviously, she doesn't have Joe Biden's long history with Netanyahu. She was not on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, for all those decades. Things that shaped him on that issue. And I think that she has shown time and time again that she is able to call for a ceasefire, for example, to talk about the plight of women, Palestinians, women who are being killed. The fact that 85% of children in Gaza have not had food for over a day in many cases. And so I think these are things that she feels very comfortable talking about. And I think there's a new opportunity to appeal to, and I'm not saying it will be easy, but I do think there's a new opportunity to appeal to Muslim voters, to young voters, to Arab American voters, to Black voters, to labor voters. These are all folks who care about this issue and think that Benjamin Netanyahu has basically done everything to stop any kind of a ceasefire or peace agreement. And so I think that's a huge opportunity. And I think she is going to be able to really shift the calculus on this.
Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, I'm going to have you come back. I want to talk to you about the AAPI community's reaction to her, because all of my friends who are Indian American are losing their minds because she is also a part of the community.
So excited. I'm telling people how to pronounce her name. It's Kamala, and it means lotus in Hindi.
I'm telling you, all the aunties in the AAPI community are going wild. Pramila Jayapal, Congresswoman, thank you very much. Back to you, Rachel.
Thank you.
That was excellent. Yeah, the first time I mispronounced then Senator Harris. No, I think she was then Attorney General Harris's name. I got like 17 calls from friends, 15 of whom were Indian American, who were like, just think comma. Comma. It's okay. Your mnemonic is comma. I was like, right. Never forget it again. It is burned into me. All right. Over these last few weeks of sort of Sturm und Drang in the Democratic Party over what was going to happen with their presidential ticket, one of the key dynamics that I think was noted by a lot of sharp observers of the process, sharp observers of this president, is that President Biden keeps the circle around him tight. Joe Biden has been in politics a very, very long time. He has held on to key advisors for a long time, held on to key staff for a long time. Over long portions of that long record, he's had the same people very near to him, and that creates an intense circle of trust around him that is nevertheless small. One of the Biden lifers who has been a key man, particularly in this phase of his career, in this administration, is Ron Klain, longtime advisor and former chief of staff to President Biden. And Ron joins us now live. Mr. Klain, it's really nice of you to be here with us tonight. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Rachel.
First, let me ask you about the president's health. I know you've been in touch with him. He has COVID. We have heard from the president's physician that he's finished his course of Paxlovid and he's doing better. Yeah. Can you tell us anything about how he's doing?
Well, I'm not a doctor, but I talked to him today. He sounded better. And very excited about the vice president's campaign and excited about calling into that event in Wilmington and, coming back to Washington and when the time is right, getting out on the campaign trail on her behalf. He was very fired up about her race.
His voice sounded strong, I have to say, phoning into that event, which I was happy to hear. And then when we got the news that he's going to be back at the White House tomorrow, that seems additionally like further good news. All that said, and I hear the sort of confidence and the sort of optimism in your voice, this has to have just been a searing few days, particularly Sunday, particularly yesterday for the president. What can you tell us about how difficult this was for him personally and the level of confidence he had in the decision once he decided he was going to do it?
Well, look, the president's a fighter. He wanted to fight to win this election. And he had been out on the trail since the debate, I thought, very effectively in North Carolina and Michigan, doing a press conference after the NATO summit, and wanted to fight and win this campaign. But I think he came to the conclusion that it wasn't possible. He has a tremendous degree of confidence in Vice President Harris. He obviously endorsed her in the statement that he withdrew from the race and has gone all in on her behalf, as all of us have. And I think the American people saw today in her speech why she's going to be a great candidate. And I can tell you, as the person who was her next door neighbor in the West Wing for 2 years and saw her in action in the Situation Room in the Oval Office, she will be a great president. She's ready to do this job. She'll do great on the campaign trail. She'll do great in the Oval Office next year.
Ron, how much effort, planning, forethought, sort of gaming things out was done about trying to make this a smooth transition, trying to make this what my colleague Lawrence O'Donnell earlier described as effectively a seamless transition? The statement that came out from President Biden yesterday at 1:46 p.m. Eastern initially did not include the endorsement. Less than a half an hour later, he then set out a second statement unequivocally and clearly endorsing Vice President Harris. That set off a remarkable consolidation and wave of energy in the Democratic Party that has very clearly established that she will be the nominee. And nobody has obviously come out and said that they should be the nominee instead. How much of that was natural and organic? How much of that was orchestrated, was planned, was gamed out in advance?
Well, I think it was almost all natural and organic. Look, the president, as he said today, loves the vice president. His first decision as our party's nominee was to pick her to be his running mate. That meant he believed she was the right person to take over if he couldn't. And he worked with her every day for the past 3 years and saw her in action, saw the advice she gave in the Situation Room, in the Oval Office, the work she did on Capitol Hill to help pass this agenda that you and Congresswoman Jayapal were talking about before, that Joy Reid and Congresswoman Jayapal were talking about before. And so, she's been a partner in getting all this done. His support for her is natural. And look, the reality is she's the only person other than Joe Biden to get 80 million votes in this country. And this is not some kind of coordination. She is the product of a popular process that put her in the vice presidency. And she is the choice of, I think, the Democratic voters. And we'll see that as this process unfolds. And people saw her campaign today, and she's a great campaigner. And I think it's absolutely natural that people rally behind her.
Ron, today the DNC chairman, Jamie Harrison, announced that the party will deliver a presidential nominee by August 7th, which means there's not going to be any choosing a nominee at the convention. This is not going to be 1968. In establishing the plan, setting out the rules memo about how this is going to happen, it seems pretty clearly that this is going to be not only not chaotic, but an orderly fashion that's within the rules as everybody understands them. As far as the DNC is handling this, the plan to do a virtual nomination, virtual roll call ahead of the convention itself, does that all seem right to you? Obviously, there's different ways they could have approached this, but does this seem like the right approach from the party?
It is the right approach, I think, Rachel. Well, first of all, it is functionally the same as doing at the convention. The same people, the delegates, will vote. They'll just vote early. Why are they going to vote early? So that we can make sure that Vice President Harris's name is on the ballot in all 50 states. We have, our convention's unusually late this year because of the timing of the Republican convention, the timing of the Olympics. It's unusually late. And as a result, to make sure that she is on the ballot in all 50 states, we need to confirm the party's nominee before the early August deadlines in a handful of states, and particularly in Ohio, where there's been all kinds of chicanery around this in the state of Ohio. And so I think being careful about it. Again, it doesn't change the outcome here. The delegates still vote. They're just going to vote by using a different mechanism than they would in Chicago. Same people, same votes, same delegates, same way of choosing a nominee, just a couple days early to make sure that our candidate is on the ballot in all 50 states.
One last question for you, Ron. What should we expect from President Biden in terms of campaigning with his vice president? This is an unusual circumstance where you've got effectively a re-election campaign with the incumbent president in what will be a supporting role on the campaign. What will that look like? What should we expect from the two of them in terms of joining forces to try to win in November?
Well, look, I think this is her campaign. People are going to want to see her out there bringing the message like she did today in Wilmington. I think the president will join her when that's helpful and effective, and whenever she asks. He has a job to do. He's president of the United States. He'll do that job first and foremost. But I think when she wants him on the campaign trail, he'll be out there, just like President Obama campaigned in the closing days of the 2020 election for President Biden, just like, there were some appearances by President Clinton on behalf of Vice President Gore in 2000. So I think it'll be the same kind of thing we've seen in the past, that when it's the time and the place and it's effective and helps rally voters, she'll ask him to come out on this campaign trail and he'll do it. He can make a very strong case for her. He's worked with her every day these 4 years. He's seen how effective she is, and he feels very strongly about her election. So he'll be out there with full voice and full throat, telling voters what he knows, that this is a person who's a great candidate for president and will be a great president next year.
President Biden's former White House Chief of Staff, Ron Klain. Ron, thank you so much for your time tonight. I'm sure you haven't slept in a few weeks. I really appreciate you being here with us tonight. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Rachel.
All right. Since last night, Kamala Harris has been piling up endorsements from the major labor unions in the country, an incredibly important constituency in this country in Democratic politics, one where the Republican Party is trying to make a play. With the notable exception of the United Auto Workers Union, a lot of labor unions have already come out and endorsed Kamala Harris. Now, UAW previously endorsed Joe Biden. We're going to speak with the president of the UAW about that next. We've also got Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar, who's going to be joining us here live on set. We have so much to get to. Stay with us. Thanks for being with us here for this special coverage. We'll be right back.
We are fighting to protect the sacred right to organize. We are protecting the sacred right to organize because we know when unions are strong, America is strong.
It was Vice President Kamala Harris just 2 months ago addressing SEIU, the Service Employees International Union, one of the biggest labor unions in the country. After President Biden announced that he would no longer seek re-election and endorsed Vice President Harris, SEIU was one of the first big unions to announce their endorsement for Harris for president as well. Since then, there's been a wave of labor support for Harris with endorsements from big labor unions and labor groups, including the American Federation of Teachers, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the United Farm Workers, the Amalgamated Transit Union, the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, the United Food and Commercial Workers International Union, Communication Workers of America, AFSCME, American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, America's largest federation of unions, the AFL-CIO. They have all come out explicitly in the last 30 hours and endorsed Kamala Harris for president of the United States. Now, one big, important, influential, high-profile union that has not explicitly endorsed Kamala Harris yet is the United Auto Workers, UAW. Earlier this year, the UAW endorsed President Biden after he became the first sitting president ever to walk a picket line with striking auto workers. Ever since the UAW's endorsement of Joe Biden, Republican Donald Trump has been lashing out at the union and specifically at UAW President Shawn Fain. Donald Trump even made a weird non sequitur ad lib in his discursive, unending convention speech that Shawn Fain should be fired. And all the RNC delegates were like, are we clapping for that? What is this? In a statement after Joe Biden's announcement that he would no longer stand for re-election, the UAW made a point of saying this, quote, Vice President Kamala Harris walked the picket line with us in 2019, and along with President Biden, has brought work and jobs back to communities like Lordstown, Ohio, and Belvedere, Illinois. Quote, the path forward is clear. We will defeat Donald Trump and his billionaire agenda and elect a champion for the working class to the highest office in this country. Again, that statement from UAW. Jen Psaki, over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Rachel. And joining us now is United Auto Workers President Shawn Fain. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. So Rachel just gave a very long list of all of the unions that have endorsed Kamala Harris, the vice president, who is now going to be likely the nominee. The United Auto Workers is not on that list. Are you ready to join that list and make an announcement tonight?
So thank you for having us. And look, we have a process we follow, and just like anything, and let's be real. I mean, this last couple of weeks has been a very, just a very emotional few weeks, and especially this last few days. Seeing President Biden make a sacrifice for this nation, and look, I mean, I got to tell you, it's a bittersweet moment. I love President Biden. Greatest president in my lifetime, the most pro-labor president in my lifetime. And, obviously he did the honorable thing. And, think about that. I mean, can you ever imagine Donald Trump putting his ego aside and doing what's right for the country? It would never happen. So, with Vice President Harris, we have a process we follow. The membership put the International Executive Board in charge of this. And we're going to be discussing things over the next few days. And then we'll choose that path forward, and then we'll make announcements as we deem fit. So, one thing I do know, President Biden, first president in history to join striking workers on a picket line. Kamala Harris was right there with us in 2019 when Donald Trump was president. You know where Donald Trump wasn't in 2019? He sure as hell wasn't on a picket line.
No question about that. And I've traveled with President Biden to visit union workers, and I know that the support and the response is really incredible. Tell us a little bit. You said it's a couple of days maybe for this process. Is there a deadline or timeline we should anticipate? And what exactly is your executive committee looking for as they're considering this? Because Vice President Harris was, of course, it's the Biden-Harris agenda, and everything they fought for are the things that I assume they supported when they endorsed Joe Biden.
Yeah, so we're looking at a lot of things right now. We have our team looking at other people, not as I don't believe as presidential candidates, but other possible vice president candidates and things like that. Look, we feel like we have an obligation to represent working class interests. So when we meet and we have those discussions with Vice President Harris's team, and we want to have input and talk about what we're seeing and what we're hearing from our members and from our board. And so we're not going to rush in and just throw it out there. We want to have fruitful discussions when we meet, and I think it's important that we do that. We owe that to them.
Absolutely. Now, let me ask you, I know there's been a lot of calls that have been happening. President Biden, Vice President Harris, have you had the chance to speak with either of them over the last day and a half?
Unfortunately, I believe Vice President Harris tried to call me yesterday, and I was in the unfortunate situation with the airlines. A couple of flights were canceled, and when she did try to call, I was in the air and could not take a call. So we've reached out and expressed, anytime she's ready to talk, glad to talk with her and look forward to it.
Well, thank you so much, President of the United Auto Workers, Shawn Fain. Well, we'll all be waiting to hear what happens with your endorsement process. Really appreciate you joining us tonight. Back to you, Rachel.
Oh, thank you.
Shawn Fain, I will say every time I've hosted Shawn Fain on my show before, and I've talked a lot about United Auto Workers and that remarkable strike effort that they had this year. He agitates people in power so much in such exactly the way he wants to agitate them. I get people, the way he talks about economic issues, the way he talks about class, the way he talks about billionaires, the way he talks about the improper influence of money in politics, so gets under the skin of people who feel entitled to say that they want to have a bone to pick with me about my coverage.
But he doesn't do it in a class warfare sort of way. He does it in a completely practical way, and you just can't wiggle out of it.
He is a very, very, very effective union leader and a very influential figure in Democratic politics, and he drives Donald Trump absolutely crazy. The fact that he mentioned him by name specifically, and it wasn't in Trump's prepared remarks, he ad-libbed an attack on Shawn Fain in his convention speech.
It was, yes, under his skin, in a very strange 90-minute speech we all watched that included Hannibal Lecter as well, as we all remember. He went after Shawn Fain. And what Shawn Fain did in response was issue a direct, lengthy statement. I mean, he went after him on Lordstown, Ohio, and not failing to deliver on his promise there. He went after him over and over and over again in his statement. That's the right way to take on a bully. That's the other thing for people to know.
The next day, Donald Trump went on to talk about who he was going to deliver for, Elon Musk. Donald Trump in the last 3 days said, Elon Musk is giving me $45 million a month. We got to make that guy happy. You know what Elon Musk doesn't like? Auto unions. Absolutely not. That's what Tesla is known for. And it's why it was almost puzzling last week when you saw the head of the Teamsters up there on the stage at the RNC. The audience was sort of like, yay, we want your vote, but we're anti-union.
And the vice presidential candidate saying, we're for the working class, not for Wall Street. The cognitive dissonance from the top of the ticket to the second spot on the ticket is
the real estate developer and the venture capital guy are obviously for the working man.
Sure. But that's why this campaign needs to educate the American voter, because in this age of misinformation, J.D. Vance's spiel and Donald Trump saying, I'm coming to your town and I'm working for you, Kamala Harris and her campaign need to show people what they are doing and what Donald Trump will not be doing.
That's exactly right. Still ahead tonight, we will speak with Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar. She's going to be here live on set. We've got more ahead as our special coverage continues. Stay with us.
I am firsthand witness that every day our President Joe Biden fights for the American people, and we are deeply, deeply grateful for his service to our nation.
Tomorrow, Vice President Kamala Harris will hit the road for her first campaign event since President Biden has endorsed her to replace him at the top of the Democratic ticket. We have just learned since we have been on the air tonight that the Harris campaign will put Vice President Harris tomorrow afternoon in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, notably the city that just last week hosted the Republican National Convention, where they clearly thought they had this thing in the bag. Surprise! This will be Kamala Harris's fifth campaign stop in Wisconsin this year. This time it is likely to land a little bit different. Joining us now here on set is our friend Senator Amy Klobuchar. Nice to see you.
Good to see you, Rachel.
The last time we were here in person, I had a coughing fit and you had to take over my show secretly.
That actually happened.
That really
I think you were on the floor and I just kept talking.
You kept talking so they could keep the camera on you while I fell on the floor coughing.
I just try not to do that. I had layers of points about healthcare that no one knows existed. And I just kept going. Everyone said, wow, Rachel must honest, really. I mean, to let you talk that long.
That's such detail. So what is your reaction to President Biden's decision, both his decision to remove himself from consideration for re-election, but also his endorsement of Vice President Harris?
Well, first of all, he took the honorable path, and he did it with grace. And you think about his incredible career. And to me, it's not just the legacy, which Jen knows so well, of the infrastructure, of the bringing NATO, making it stronger. Most important to me, bringing back the rule of law, putting Ketanji Brown Jackson on the Supreme Court. But it's also about moving forward. And for him, moving forward is these next 6 months. But it's also passing the torch on to the next generation of leaders. I've had my own experience with him. I gave one of my first speeches on the Senate floor, and it was about domestic violence. And the only time slot I could get, there was no one there, except maybe the pages. I don't know. So I give this speech, and I get off the floor, and the phone rings. And I think, oh, maybe it's my mom. And then I thought, no, my mom didn't even stay up to watch this. It was Joe Biden.
Oh, wow.
He was a senator, and he called and said, hey, kid, really good job. And I noticed today when the vice president and who I believe will be the future president addressed the campaign crowd, he said, good job, kid. And it just reminded me of that role that he is playing and has played. And that's what you're going to see in these next few months of this campaign. And so many people he has fostered in their careers and their lives. And I'm just really excited about this. And of course, having run with both of them, I think you moderated one of the debates.
Indeed.
The very cold debate.
Yes, I'm sorry. You were under a vent. It wasn't fair.
Yeah.
You were colder than everybody else, and it was moving your hair in a weird way. I'm sorry.
Yes, and I was standing next to Kamala in that debate. I just think she's going to do a great job as a candidate and as a president. She's going to bring receipts to this. She's been on the world stage. She's made incredibly important decisions with the president that has gotten our country through this pandemic in a much stronger economic position. And I'm just looking forward to seeing her on the world stage.
There are a lot of debates I think we're all looking forward to. You serve in the Senate with J.D. Vance as well. And we know that from reporting in The Atlantic from Tim Alberta that there might be a little bit of concern about J.D. Vance maybe being too much of a own the libs choice to appeal to a broader section of the electorate, and especially now that the ticket has changed. What do you think the Harris team should be looking for in a vice presidential nominee, especially when you think about it in the context of J.D. Vance?
Well, I think it's going to be, first of all, we got to get through our own process, big tent. I don't see many people emerging to run, but we're going to have to get through that. And at the same time, Kamala Harris is going to be picking a running mate. And I think it should be someone she trusts, it should be someone who augments her own skills, and someone that could step in and govern. And there's just incredible choices out there. So I think she'll pick someone good, and I think it will continue this theme of generational change. What I saw at their convention was kind of a doubling down on their support, sort of the Hulk Hogan situation. And so I think
literally the Hulk Hogan situation.
It was just a metaphor. It actually happened. And so that's kind of what I see happening here. It's just going to be able to reach out to a lot of people in this country.
Our colleague Joy Reid is in Washington and wants to ask you a question.
Hey, Joy.
Hi, Senator. Good to talk to you. So I have just been sort of in a wormhole of the 2016 versus 2020 demographics of the election. I think a lot of women in this country have their pantsuits from the Hillary Clinton campaign sort of embalmed in their closets, and they probably weep over them every so often. It was the closest that we previously came to electing a woman president. And while Hillary Clinton won by 3 million votes, her narrow margin of defeat in these three key swing states, was because she had a huge deficit with particularly men versus what happened when Joe Biden won. And Joe Biden over-indexed on a few demographics. Men, he won them. There was an 11-point gap, right? Joe Biden he shrunk that gap. He did much better among white men in particular. He ate into that. And while Hillary Clinton barely lost white women, she lost them 49 to 47% to Donald Trump, despite all his issues. Joe Biden did better with white women as well. But for that white women cohort, it's a small gap that Kamala Harris would have to make up. Is Roe enough to make up that gap? so that white women will come home to the Democratic Party, which is not a normal thing. It's normally a mostly Republican vote. How does Kamala Harris close that gap? And can she close the gap with men?
I think she can close many gaps. Difference, we know a lot more about Donald Trump than we did at that moment. We saw what he was like as president. We saw the divisiveness, and we saw what happened. The issue of abortion, you can see it from the prairies of Kansas to the Supreme Court race in Wisconsin. You could see it in what we saw in the Virginia legislative races to what happened in the governor's race in Kentucky. It made a difference all over the country in all these races. And Kamala Harris, who I watched cross-examine these very Supreme Court justices who made this decision, is going to be on the same debate stage, I hope, with Donald Trump, who issued a video this year in which he said he proudly was the one who overturned Roe v. Wade. I don't know how much of a stark difference you can have than that. We know the chaos that it has unleashed. We know the women bleeding out in parking lots waiting to get their health care. The problems where even IVF and mifepristone and all contraception are at risk. That is going to be a major issue, and there is no better person to prosecute that case than Kamala Harris. You're also going to have the fact that she was a prosecutor, and this is a guy with over 100 felony indictments and number of convictions. So you're going to see major differences on that.
Senator Amy Klobuchar, are you busy?
Just a little bit busy. Are you going on? Returning to Washington to the Senate tomorrow.
Are you too busy to stay for one more segment with us?
I would love to be on a segment.
Okay, we have to talk about this coconut tree thing, and I want you here for it.
Okay, I'm ready to go.
Senator Klobuchar and the coconut tree thing. There's a lot to get to.
We have a lot of them in Minnesota.
I'll explain in just a moment.
No.
We'll be yes, Minnesota. It's obvious choice. We'll be right back. I'm going to try to get through this without sounding like an old person. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to fail. Let's do this failure together. By now, you have probably seen this.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you.
That was Vice President Kamala Harris giving a speech more than a year ago at the White House, at an event about how to create more opportunities for Hispanic Americans. She's trying to make a point there, kind of an elegant point, about how in order to make progress, you also have to know where you came from. You didn't just fall out of a coconut tree, right? But out of context, it does sound, well, I don't know. How does it sound to you? Turns out it was almost designed in a lab to become a meme. And so in the last week or so, with the fervor building in the Democratic Party about Harris potentially becoming the Democratic presidential nominee, this moment has started bouncing around the internet again. This person has added sparkles. As you see, this is why the governor of Colorado included a coconut and tree emoji when he endorsed her yesterday. This is why Hawaii Senator Brian Schatz posted a photo of himself scaling an actual coconut tree when he posted his congratulations and endorsement. And then at some point in the night last night, the memification of Kamala Harris took on a life of its own. A lot of it is just Kamala Harris being Kamala Harris with her distinctive belly laugh, her big signature laugh that a lot of people like. So someone made a 2.5-minute montage of just her cracking up and laughing. This is a video of Kamala Harris talking about how much she loves Venn diagrams.
I really do. I love Venn diagrams.
That's it. That's all it is. It's all over the internet today. Here's a widely shared video of Kamala Harris just dancing with kids. You could set this to anything. And then there is Brat. Charli XCX is a pop artist. She has a wildly popular album out this summer that's called Brat. This is the cover, black lo-fi text over a green background. Last night, Charli XCX tweeted this: Kamala is Brat. To be totally honest with you, I'm not really sure I know what that means, but apparently the internet knows. Kamala Harris overlaid in green to a song off of the record Brat. Me just calling it a record. There I go. This is a mashup of the coconut thing put to a song off the album.
You exist in the context
all in which you live and what came
The newly minted Harris campaign is fully leaning into their candidate being memed. They changed their campaign Twitter background to look like the Brat album cover. They tweeted out a fresh new Venn diagram, which we know is Vice President Harris's favorite means of data visualization. What do Biden HQ and Kamala HQ have in common where they overlap? Holding Trump accountable. Aren't you glad I made you stay for that?
Okay, no, it's good. But some of this actually started with the Republicans trying to go after Kamala, right? They go after her laugh, they go after the Kamala, they go after the coconut tree line and the like. And what I love about this is, as a woman candidate, and as we saw during the presidential, women candidates are held to these standards that are nearly impossible to make. And I love that they're just owning it and making fun of it and kind of becoming an icon because of it. And I think we've learned this over time, as we've learned what's happened to other women candidates, including Secretary Clinton when they ran, that you kind of got to own some of this. And while this is a lot of fun and cool, and I think you're going to see the difference between maybe a Biden candidacy and a Kamala Harris candidacy, there's going to be some differences. This is one of them. It also just shows that they're going to have to run a different way to take this on, because some of this started, not the Brat part, but the coconut tree and the laugh. It started with them trying to attack her.
Yeah.
And so they're just like, okay, go for it.
Well, I feel like that's kind of it's a good campaign instinct. If somebody's taking you on for something that's not actually bad, I don't like your voice, I don't like your smile, I don't like your laugh, you're too old, you're too young, whatever it is. If they're doing it in a way that isn't actually substantively something that you are worried about, the right thing to do is to boomerang that, is to turn it around and say, oh, yes, I'm going to campaign on my laugh. I'm going to campaign on these things that you're trying to turn into a negative that I know shouldn't be seen that way. It's not always easy to execute, but they're doing it.
No question about it. I mean, we've been talking a little bit tonight about just what's coming her way, which is sexism, misogyny, racism, a lot of this. And I mean, making fun of her laugh. I hope she never changes her laugh, by the way. I think it's an authentic part of who she is. I saw you getting kind of almost emotional before when you're talking about Joe Biden, which is, by the way, how a lot of people I've spoken to who love him so much have felt. But what can we expect from Harris moving forward? How is she going to take on these attacks on her that are so gross and so misogynistic and so sexist? And how do you think the campaign should do that?
Well, she's going to do it with her head held high. She has an incredible posture. Let's start with that. And I think that's how she's got to go. She's got a lot of it, as we tell women candidates, I do all the time when they're getting started, just let it go. And then a lot of it, they're going to have to take them on. You got to always draw that line. When you're going to call them out for it, and when you're going to make fun of it. When are you going to own it? And when are you just going to, again, make fun of it? Some of it is going to have to be not taking everything seriously, because Donald Trump says crazy stuff all the time, as we saw in the hour-and-a-half speech, in which I listened to every word. And I think that's what they're going to have to decide. But I think her general demeanor and the way she handles things is she's not going to let it get to her, because she knows she's got a much bigger job, and that's to get things done for the people of this country.
Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, it's really good to have you here. You should come by more often.
Okay, I will.
All right, good. We'll be right back. Stay with us. To paraphrase President Joe Biden, the election of 2024 was always going to be a big freaking deal. But now, with Biden stepping aside, Harris jumping in, the excitement, the energy, the jitters, it is a whole lot all at once. If you would like to spend a day with other folks who are as riveted by this as we all are, may I recommend an upcoming event? MSNBC Live Democracy 2024 is on the books. It's happening Saturday, September 7th. It's in Brooklyn, New York. A bunch of us hosts are going to be there. And the reason I'm telling you this now is because we just released a new batch of tickets today for the evening session, including some great seats. So again, new tickets newly available. It's Saturday, September 7th in Brooklyn. The website, if you want to find out more, including how to get tickets, it's msnbc.com/democracy2024. Again, msnbc.com/democracy2024.
Introducing MSNBC Premium on Apple Podcasts. Get early access to new original podcasts from MSNBC and ad-free listening to all of Rachel Maddow's chart-topping, award-winning original series, including Season 1 and Season 2 of Ultra, Bagman, and Deja News, plus exclusive bonus content and new episodes of The Rachel Maddow Show and Morning Joe ad-free. Subscribe to MSNBC Premium on Apple Podcasts.